My fiancée wanted her parents to own my business. What happened next left everyone, and then, my name's Lucas, and I'm 33 years old. I built my life the hard way, brick by brick, mistake by mistake. My IT consulting firm might not be a household name like Apple or Microsoft, but it's mine. Every inch of its success is the result of sleepless nights, countless sacrifices, and a ridiculous amount of determination. When I say I started from nothing, I mean it. No family money, no generous investors, no lucky breaks. Just me, a battered laptop, and a dream. I remember those early days vividly. I was living in a tiny apartment in Austin, Texas, barely big enough to fit my bed and a desk. I'd work 12-hour days on freelance coding gigs, learning the ropes while juggling rent payments and ramen dinners. My social life? Non-existent. Vacations? Forget it. Every dollar I made went into growing my business, and every moment I had was spent figuring out how to keep it afloat. 5 years later, that gamble paid off. My consulting firm, while small, became a trusted name in the local tech scene. We weren't revolutionizing the industry, but we were reliable, efficient, and profitable. And most importantly, I had something that was entirely mine. There's a kind of pride that comes with building something from the ground up, and I'll admit, I'm fiercely protective of what I've created. About a year ago, I met Sophia. She was 28, full of life, and had this magnetic energy that drew people to her. We met at a tech networking event in Dallas, and honestly, I wasn't even planning to attend. But there she was, standing out in the crowd like she owned the place. She wasn't a techie, but she worked in PR, which meant she knew how to command attention with charm and confidence. Sophia was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they'd known her forever. She had a way with people, something I definitely lacked. While I'm the kind of guy who would rather solve a problem in silence than talk about it, she thrived in the spotlight. At first, I found that balance refreshing. I thought, maybe this was what I needed. Someone who could balance out my quieter, more serious personality. We started dating not long after that first meeting. Sophia was ambitious, confident, and knew how to enjoy life in ways I didn't. She loved fine dining, weekend getaways, and designer clothes. At first, her lifestyle didn't bother me. Sure, I wasn't used to it, but I figured, hey, I've been grinding for years. I can afford to splurge a little. Besides, I liked seeing her happy, and her enthusiasm was infectious. Before I knew it, we were in a serious relationship. Sophia seemed to understand my work ethic, my drive, and the sacrifices I'd made to get where I was. Or at least, that's what I believed at the time. She'd tell me how much she admired my dedication and independence, and for a while, I felt like I'd found someone who truly got me. 6 months into dating, I proposed. It wasn't anything flashy, a simple dinner at a quiet restaurant, just the two of us. I asked her to marry me, and she said yes without hesitation. I felt like I was on top of the world. For the first time in a long time, I thought I'd found a partner I could build a future with. Planning the wedding was entirely Sophia's domain, and honestly, I was fine with that. She thrived on details, from the venue to the flowers, while I was happy to sit back and let her handle it. She'd send me updates and pictures of floral arrangements or table settings, and I'd give her a thumbs up, knowing it wasn't really my area of expertise. I focused on my work while she dove headfirst into wedding prep. We seemed to have a good rhythm. At least, that's what I thought. One evening, about 3 months before the wedding, we were sitting in the kitchen. Sophia was scrolling through Pinterest on her laptop, humming to herself as she looked at flower arrangements. I was sipping coffee, half listening as she talked about peonies and roses, things I had absolutely no opinion on. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Lucas, we need to talk about my parents." I set my coffee down, already sensing this wasn't going to be about flowers. "Okay, what about them?" I asked. She smiled, the kind of smile that usually meant she wanted something. "Don't you think we should do something special to thank them for everything they've done for us?" I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't we already? We took them on that trip to Denver last month, and I bought your dad that custom watch for his birthday. What else were you thinking?" Sophia closed her laptop and leaned forward, as if she was about to share a brilliant idea. "I was thinking you could give them a small stake in your company." For a second, I thought I misheard her. "Wait, what? A small stake?" she said again, like it was the most natural thing in the world, just as a gesture of gratitude. It would mean so much to them. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around the sheer audacity of the request. You want me to give your parents a share of my company? As a gift? She nodded. Yes. It's a sign of trust and respect. They've done so much for me, and this would show that you value them too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I actually laughed, thinking she had to be joking. Sophia, I built this company from nothing. Your parents had no part in it. Why would I give them a share? Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. Because they're family. My family is going to be your family soon. This isn't just about business. It's about building connections. I put my coffee down, suddenly wide awake. Sophia, I don't think you understand how businesses work. Giving someone a stake in my company isn't symbolic. It's legal. This is my livelihood we're talking about. She sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. You're overthinking it. It's just a small gesture. They're not going to take over or anything. I rubbed my temples, trying to keep my voice calm. This isn't symbolic. It's a massive ask. Your parents didn't help build this business, and they didn't invest in it. Why would I hand them part of it? Her tone sharpened. Because they're my parents, Lucas. Without them, I wouldn't even be here. Don't you think they deserve something in return? I didn't have an answer for that, at least, not one she wanted to hear. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a one-time thing. Sophia's request wasn't just unreasonable, it was entitled. And the fact that she thought it was a reasonable thing to ask? That was a red flag I couldn't ignore. The morning after Sophia first floated her idea, I woke up hoping she'd slept it off. People say dumb things when they're emotional, right? I figured she'd realize how ridiculous her suggestion was after having some time to think. We'd talk it through over breakfast, laugh about how absurd the idea was, and move on. But deep down, I had a nagging feeling that wouldn't be the case. I made coffee as usual, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. Sophia kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for the coffee, and sat scrolling through her phone while I skimmed emails on my laptop. I was starting to convince myself that maybe I'd overreacted, that she'd drop it, and we'd put the whole conversation behind us. Then, like clockwork, she shattered my illusion. Lucas, she said, setting her phone down and looking at me with the same determined expression she used when trying to convince me to go on extravagant weekend trips. I've been thinking about what we talked about last night. My stomach dropped. Sophia, I said, already feeling exhausted. We don't need to rehash this. I thought we were done with that conversation. She tilted her head and gave me the kind of smile people reserve for convincing toddlers to eat vegetables. I just think you're not seeing the bigger picture. This isn't about money or control. It's about showing my parents that you value them as much as I do. I closed my laptop and sighed. Sophia, I respect your parents. I really do. But giving them a stake in my company isn't about respect. It's a legal and financial nightmare. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. You're overthinking it. My parents wouldn't get involved in running the business. It's not about that. It's just a token of appreciation. I leaned back in my chair, trying to stay calm. A token of appreciation is a heartfelt note, a dinner, or even a generous gift, not handing over part of my livelihood. Once someone owns shares in a business, it's theirs. It doesn't matter if they're involved or not. And honestly, your parents don't know the first thing about running a tech company. She waved her hand dismissively. They don't need to know anything. It's not about running the business. It's about making them feel appreciated. That was the moment it hit me. She was dead serious. This wasn't a joke, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. She truly believed that giving her parents part of my company was a reasonable idea. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus on work. Every time I tried to concentrate, the conversation replayed in my head. It wasn't just the absurdity of her request that bothered me. It was the entitlement behind it. The fact that she didn't even see how unreasonable she was being. I started asking myself a question I didn't want to face. Is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? Constant guilt trips and demands disguised as gestures of appreciation? Things escalated that evening. We were sitting on the couch, half watching a TV show, when Sophia turned to me and dropped another bomb. You know, she said casually. If my parents had a stake in your business, it could actually benefit you too. I hit pause on the remote and turned to her, trying to keep my frustration in check. What are you talking about now? They're really well connected, she said, flipping her hair like she was pitching a business deal. My dad knows tons of people in real estate, and my mom is part of several women's entrepreneur groups. They could help bring in new clients. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Sophia, my business doesn't need your parents' help. I've been growing it just fine without them. But think about the potential, she pressed, her voice rising with excitement. With their connections, you could scale faster. This isn't just for them, it's for us. For our future. There it was. She'd shifted tactics. It wasn't about gratitude anymore. Now it was about our future. As if that made her demand any less ridiculous. I shook my head. If this is about our future, I said slowly, then you should be supporting the business I've already built, not trying to hand pieces of it to your parents. Her smile vanished, replaced by a frown. I am supporting you, she said sharply. I just think you're being short-sighted. Her tone and expression made something inside me snap. Sophia, I said firmly, I respect that your parents are important to you, but this is crossing a line. She crossed her arms and gave me a look I'd never seen before. Calculated, cold, and completely unyielding. If you can't do this one thing for me and my family, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, then maybe you don't care about us as much as you say you do. I stared at her, stunned. She was guilt-tripping me. Over this. I didn't even know how to respond, so I stood up and walked out of the room before I said something I couldn't take back. The next morning, Sophia's persistence took a more insidious turn. While I was at work, my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. When I picked up, it was her mom, Martha. Hi, Lucas, she chirped, her tone overly cheerful. I just wanted to thank you for being so thoughtful about including us in the business. Sophia mentioned your idea, and we're so touched. It's such a generous gesture. I nearly dropped my phone. Excuse me? Don't be modest, Martha laughed. Sophia told us you're thinking about giving us a stake in your company as a wedding gift. We're so honored. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never agreed to anything like that. Her tone shifted immediately, the warmth replaced by a sharp edge. Oh, well, that's not what Sophia said. Yeah, well, Sophia and I haven't exactly come to an agreement on this, I said, as firmly as I could. And frankly, I'm not comfortable with the idea. There was a pause on the other end, and then she said, I see. Well, I hope you'll reconsider. This would mean a lot to us. I ended the call, my blood boiling. Sophia had gone behind my back and sold her parents on an idea I'd explicitly refused. That night, I confronted her as soon as I walked through the door. Why did your mom call me about the business? I asked, my voice sharp. Sophia didn't even look guilty. I thought it would help if they knew how much this could mean to them. Help? I snapped. You made it sound like I'd already agreed to this. She crossed her arms and stared me down. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I was just trying to get everyone on the same page. This isn't a group project, Sophia. I shot back. This is my business. My work. You have no right to promise anything about it to anyone. Her expression hardened, and for the first time, I saw just how far she was willing to go. If you can't do this for me, then maybe we need to rethink this engagement. For a moment, I just stared at her, stunned. Then I said the only thing I could. Maybe we do. After Sophia threw down her ultimatum, the air in our house became thick with tension. We barely spoke to each other, and when we did, it was clipped, strained, and usually about something mundane, like groceries or whose turn it was to take out the trash. But even in those brief interactions, I could feel the weight of her resentment. It was suffocating. I tried to focus on work, but that was easier said than done. My mind kept replaying the argument, her sharp words ringing in my ears. If you can't do this one thing for me, maybe we need to rethink this engagement. Every time I thought about it, my stomach twisted. This wasn't just a fight about shares in my business. It was about trust, respect, and control. And right now, it felt like all three had been shattered. I needed clarity, So I called the one person I knew would give it to me straight. My best friend, David. He'd always been the voice of reason in my life. The guy who wasn't afraid to tell me when I was being an idiot or when someone else was taking advantage of me. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. When I explained the situation over the phone, there was a long silence on the other end. Then David let out a low whistle. "Man," he said, "this is bad. Like, really bad." "Yeah, no kidding," I muttered. "Let me get this straight," he said. "She's basically threatening to call off the wedding unless you give her parents a stake in your company?" "Pretty much. And she doesn't see why that's insane?" "Nope." David let out a bitter laugh. "Lucas, I don't know what to tell you, man. This isn't normal. Like, at all. If she's this entitled now, imagine what it's going to be like when you're married." That was the question I'd been avoiding. Did I really want to spend the rest of my life navigating this kind of behavior? Did I want to be with someone who thought it was okay to use manipulation and guilt to get her way? "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I mean, I love her, but this feels like a line I can't cross." "Then don't cross it," David said firmly. "If she can't respect your boundaries now, she's not going to start respecting them later. You've got to stand your ground." I knew he was right, but knowing and doing are two very different things. By the time I hung up, I felt a little less alone but no closer to a solution. That evening, Sophia finally decided to confront the elephant in the room. We were sitting in the living room, the TV playing some mindless sitcom we weren't watching, when she turned to me and said, "So, have you made your decision?" I didn't even pretend to misunderstand her. "About the shares?" I asked, my tone flat. She nodded, her expression unreadable. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Yeah, I've made my decision. The answer is no, Sophia. I'm not giving your parents a stake in my company." Her face hardened. "Then maybe this relationship isn't going to work." I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was bluffing, but her eyes told me she wasn't. "Maybe it's not," I said quietly. For a moment, she just sat there, stunned. I don't think she'd expected me to call her bluff. "You're seriously willing to throw everything away over this?" she asked, her voice rising. "I could ask you the same thing," I shot back. "You're the one making unreasonable demands and threatening to walk away when you don't get your way. What kind of foundation is that for a marriage?" She didn't respond. Instead, she stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the house. I didn't follow her. I just sat there in the silence, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting, wondering how we'd gotten here. The next day, I called Maggie, my lawyer. Maggie wasn't just an attorney. She was a friend I trusted, someone who had seen her fair share of messy situations. If anyone could help me navigate this, it was her. When I walked into her office, she greeted me with a smile and a cup of coffee. "All right, Lucas," she said. "What's got you so rattled?" I sighed and launched into the whole story, from Sophia's initial suggestion to her parents' involvement to the ultimatum. As I spoke, Maggie's smile faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Wow," she said. "That's a lot. Tell me about it," I muttered. "Let me get this straight," she said. "Your fiancée is demanding you give her parents a stake in your company, and she's threatening to end the engagement if you don't?" "Pretty much." Maggie let out a low whistle. "Lucas, this is a massive red flag. Like, wave it in the air and run the other way kind of red flag." "I know," I said, "but what am I supposed to do? I love her, but this feels like a line I can't cross." "You're absolutely right," Maggie said firmly. "You can't cross this line, not just for your sake, but for the future of your business. If you give away shares now, you're opening yourself up to a world of legal and financial complications." "Like what?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "For starters, once you transfer shares to her parents, those shares legally belong to them," she explained. "If anything goes wrong, say, they decide they want more involvement or they sell their stake to someone else, you lose control over that portion of your business. And if you and Sophia get married, it gets even messier. Those shares could be considered marital property, which means they'd be up for grabs in a divorce." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. "So you're saying this could screw me over in more ways than one?" "Exactly," Maggie said. "And let's be real here. If Sophia is making these kinds of demands now, what's to stop her from making even bigger ones down the road? I didn't have an answer to that. All I knew was that Maggie was right. This wasn't just a one-time issue. It was a glimpse into a future I wanted no part of. What do I do? I asked finally. First, protect yourself, Maggie said. Make sure your business is legally untouchable. Update your operating agreement to specify that no shares can be transferred without your explicit consent. And if you haven't already, separate your personal finances from your business accounts. Keep everything clean and untangled. Done, I said. I've always kept my business finances separate. Good, Maggie said. Now, about Sophia, you need to be crystal clear with her. No more maybe or we'll see. Tell her flat out that this isn't happening and that it's not up for discussion. If she can't accept that, she trailed off, but I knew what she was implying. Yeah, I said quietly. I might have to end it. Maggie nodded, her expression sympathetic. I know it's not easy, Lucas, but you need to think about what's best for you in the long run. A healthy relationship doesn't involve ultimatums and manipulation. I left Maggie's office feeling more resolved than I had in days. I didn't know how this was going to end, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let Sophia's demands derail everything I'd worked so hard to build. After meeting with Maggie, I felt a newfound sense of clarity, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Sophia's demands, her manipulation, and now her radio silence. It was all weighing on me. I thought we'd reached the peak of her antics, but I was wrong. The worst was yet to come. The day after I told her I wasn't budging, Sophia pulled the rug out from under me. She wasn't content with just the ultimatum. She decided to rally back up. Around mid-morning, while I was knee-deep in work, I got a text from Emma, a mutual friend. The message made my blood boil. Hey Lucas, it read. Sophia told me about everything that's been going on. I had no idea you were so against family involvement. I just think you should hear her out. She only wants what's best for both of you. I didn't even respond. Instead, I threw my phone down and stared at my laptop, furious. Sophia wasn't just trying to guilt-trip me into giving in. She was actively recruiting people to her side, twisting the narrative to paint me as the bad guy. I could only imagine the version of events she was feeding them. Over the next few hours, I got more texts. A couple of our mutual friends reached out, clearly fishing for my side of the story without directly saying so. Hey, everything okay between you and Sophia? She mentioned you guys were having a disagreement about the business. Another said, I don't want to take sides, but it sounds like this is really important to her. Maybe there's a compromise. Compromise. That word made me laugh bitterly. Sophia wasn't asking for compromise. She was demanding I hand over a part of my business to her parents, no strings attached. How was that fair? That night, I confronted her about it. She walked into the house, acting like nothing was wrong. But the second I saw her, all my frustration boiled over. Why are our friends texting me about the business? I asked, my voice tight. Sophia didn't even flinch. I don't know, she said casually. Maybe because they care about us? Don't give me that, I snapped. You told them, didn't you? You're dragging other people into our fight. I just needed someone to talk to, she said, crossing her arms defensively. I thought they'd help you see reason. Reason? I said, incredulous. You're trying to manipulate me through our friends now? How is that reasonable? She glared at me, her eyes narrowing. If you're so sure you're right, then why are you so afraid of what they think? Her words stung, but I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. Because it's none of their business, I said firmly. And the fact that you're involving them shows just how far you're willing to go to get your way. The argument spiraled from there. She accused me of being stubborn, of not valuing her family, of being too protective of my business. I countered that she was being entitled, manipulative, and completely unreasonable. By the time we were done, I was exhausted, and she stormed off to the guest room. The next day, I got another call. This time, it was Sophia's dad, Gerald. Lucas, he said, his voice calm but firm. We need to talk about what's going on. Sophia's really upset, and I think it's time we all sat down and figured this out like adults. I clenched my jaw. Gerald, with all due respect, this isn't a group discussion. This is between me and Sophia. Well, It involves us too, he said. Sophia told us everything, and we're hurt that you don't trust us enough to include us in something so important. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. Gerald, this isn't about trust. This is about my business. I built it from the ground up, and I'm not comfortable giving anyone a stake in it, no matter how much I respect them. There was a pause on the other end, and then he said, I see. But you should know, family is about compromise. If you're not willing to compromise, maybe you're not ready for marriage. That hit me harder than I expected. I ended the call quickly, before I said something I'd regret, but his words stayed with me. Was I being stubborn? Was I the one jeopardizing our future by refusing to give in? I called Maggie again that afternoon, desperate for some clarity. Am I the bad guy here? I asked, laying out everything that had happened. No, Maggie said firmly. You're not. Lucas, I've seen this kind of thing before. Manipulation like this doesn't come from a place of love. It comes from entitlement. Sophia isn't respecting your boundaries, and her parents are enabling her. If you give in now, it'll only get worse. But what if she's right? I asked. What if this is me being stubborn? Stubbornness isn't the issue, Maggie said. This is about protecting yourself. If Sophia can't understand that, then maybe she's not the right person for you. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been avoiding that thought for weeks, but now it was staring me in the face. Was this relationship salvageable? Could I really spend my life with someone who didn't respect me enough to back down from this kind of demand? The next time Sophia brought it up, I was ready. Lucas, she said one evening, her tone softer than usual. I don't want to fight anymore. Can we please figure this out? I shook my head. There's nothing to figure out, Sophia. I'm not giving your parents a stake in my business. This isn't negotiable. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let myself waver. Why are you being so stubborn? She asked, her voice trembling. I just want to make everyone happy. And what about my happiness? I asked. Does that not matter? Because I'm telling you right now, this isn't something I can live with. She didn't say anything, but the look on her face said it all. She'd expected me to cave, to give in like I always did. But this time, I didn't. Over the next few days, things between us went from bad to worse. Sophia tried every tactic she could think of. Apologies, guilt trips, even promises that this would be the last big ask she'd ever make. But I'd had enough. I could see through her words now, and I knew this wasn't about love or partnership. This was about control. When she finally realized I wasn't going to budge, she gave me one last ultimatum. If you can't do this for me, she said, her voice cold and flat, then maybe we shouldn't be together. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or hurt. I just felt done. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. She just grabbed her purse and walked out of the house. As I watched her go, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. After Sophia walked out of my house that night, I thought I'd feel crushed, but all I felt was relief. For weeks, the tension between us had been eating away at me, and now it was gone. For the first time, I could think clearly. I wasn't second-guessing myself or feeling guilty for standing my ground. I was just free. The days that followed were a whirlwind of fallout. Sophia wasted no time turning the breakup into a public spectacle. It started with a post on social media where she painted me as a selfish, controlling partner who didn't value family. The post was long, dramatic, and carefully crafted to make her look like the victim. She even included a line about how I had abandoned her right before the wedding because I refused to compromise for the sake of our future. I found out about the post through one of my employees, who pulled me aside after a meeting. Lucas, she said hesitantly, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a post about you on Facebook. It's from someone named Sophia Carter. My stomach sank. What does it say? I asked. She hesitated before answering. It's not great. She's saying some pretty harsh things about you and the breakup. I just thought you should know. That night, I read the post. It was exactly what I expected. A one-sided story full of half-truths and outright lies. The comments were a mixed bag. Some people sympathized with her, while others questioned her version of events. I didn't respond, but I saved screenshots of everything. I knew better than to get into a public argument online. It would only escalate the drama. Instead, I called Maggie. What do I do about this? I asked, forwarding her the screenshots. Honestly, she said, nothing. Unless she's saying something that could harm your business or your reputation, it's best to let it die on its own. The more you engage, the more fuel you give her. So that's what I did. I stayed quiet, even as more mutual friends reached out, asking for my side of the story. At first, I tried to explain myself, but eventually, I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The people who mattered would either believe me or they wouldn't. All I could do was focus on myself and move forward. To my surprise, most of our mutual friends ended up siding with me. Sophia's attempts to smear me only made her look petty, especially when I shared my evidence. A few friends who'd initially believed her apologized, saying they had no idea how much she twisted the truth. One friend even admitted, honestly, Lucas, we've always known Sophia had a dramatic side. But this is a whole new level. While the social fallout was manageable, dealing with Sophia herself was another story. She called me multiple times, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between anger and desperation. In one, she accused me of ruining her life and destroying her family's dreams. In another, she was sobbing, begging me to reconsider. Lucas, she said in one voicemail, her voice trembling, I was under so much pressure from my parents. I didn't mean to push you away. Please, can we just talk? I miss you. I deleted the voicemails without responding. I'd learned my lesson. Engaging with Sophia only gave her more power over me, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. The final straw came when Sophia tried to contact my parents. My mom called me one afternoon, sounding concerned. Lucas, she said, Sophia called us. She said you've been unfair to her and that you're letting your pride ruin your relationship. What's going on? Hearing that made my blood boil. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Sophia and I broke up because she crossed a line I couldn't ignore. She's trying to drag everyone into this, but I need you to trust me. I'm doing what's best for me. To her credit, my mom backed off. All right, she said. If you're sure, then we'll stay out of it. Just know we're here for you. That was the end of Sophia's attempts to manipulate my family, but it wasn't the end of her antics. A few days later, one of my business contacts reached out, saying he'd received a call from Sophia. Apparently, she'd been trying to warn people about me, claiming I was impossible to work with and prone to outbursts. Thankfully, my reputation spoke for itself. The contact dismissed her claims immediately and let me know what she was up to. At that point, I decided to take Maggie's advice and draw a hard line. I forwarded the relevant information to her, and she assured me I was in the clear. If she keeps interfering with your business, we can pursue legal action, Maggie said. But for now, just keep documenting everything. Eventually, Sophia's efforts fizzled out. Her social media posts stopped getting attention, her calls and messages stopped, and she seemed to move on, at least, as much as someone like Sophia could. I didn't hear from her again, and honestly, I was glad. The chapter was closed, and I wasn't looking back. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. Not just my business, though that continued to thrive, but myself. The relationship with Sophia had left me questioning my judgment, my boundaries, and even my ability to trust people. But over time, I realized that walking away had been the best decision I'd ever made. It wasn't just about protecting my business. It was about protecting my peace, my values, and my future. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored along the way. Sophia's entitlement, her need for control, her tendency to manipulate. It was all there from the start. I just didn't want to see it. But now, I'm grateful for the experience. It taught me the importance of setting boundaries and standing up for myself, even when it's hard. As for Sophia, I'm sure she's still out there somewhere, spinning her sob story to anyone who will listen. But that's not my problem anymore. My life is mine again, and my future is looking brighter than ever.